Hi, viewers. Welcome to Carolina Forward Interviews, where we talk to our public officials about the issues of today, the future of our state, and dive into what motivates them to dedicate themselves to public service. I'm Zach Berly. We're joined today, thank you so much for being here, by Representative Julie von Haefen, who represents District 36, which is southwestern Wake County. And Representative, first of all, thank you for being here.
Thank you.
Now, I want to start off with something a little fun. I know that you're a substitute teacher. I want to know, does that, the chaos of the classroom, does that uniquely prepare you for the chaos of the House floor?
Well, before I was in the legislature, I was a PTA leader. So I've been in the schools for 10 years. And I always kind of joke that if you can be a PTA president, you can serve in the legislature. It's very good training to be able to manage a lot of different personalities, different priorities. And so it's definitely has set me up for, hopefully success in the legislature.
So now, of course, you have to have a reason to get into politics, to want to be a representative official, and most of the time that comes from issues. What areas of whether that be public policy or public interest really motivates you to want to serve in this role?
Well, like I just said, before I was in the legislature, I was a PTA leader here in Wake County. I was a school president. I served on the county board for 5 years, and I served as the Wake County PTA president. Then I was on the state board for the North Carolina PTA, where I led our statewide advocacy efforts. So obviously that's really what led me to run for office, was public education. My work with PTA I had seen for numerous years, all the inequities here, even just here in Wake County. But then when I was on the state board, talking to PTA leaders from all across the state about, what's going on in their schools, and really, just the underfunding of our schools that have been going on the last decade. And really, that's what led me to run for office.
So now, in the House, obviously, there's a large Republican majority. What is it like, the dynamic there, having to work with your own party, trying to sustain the votes that you have, and then working with the very large Republican majority, also trying to still pass legislation?
It's been a learning experience. I think, our numbers have changed. I'm going into my third term. So, that first term when I was elected in 2018 and we broke the supermajority, that term was really exciting. There was a lot of energy. There was a lot of, enthusiasm in our caucus. And going in now to my third term where we've lost seats the last two cycles, I will have to be honest that, our spirits are a little diminished, at this point, and especially now going in this year, having just that one seat, difference between a supermajority and not. There's a lot of pressure. It's a lot. Right now, I feel like the weight is on us. The weight of the world is on our shoulders, and that can be tough. But I think that, I get so many emails and texts and DMs, from people thanking us for our work, thanking us for being there, and that keeps us motivated. So if you're watching this and you are happy with something that we're doing or something we're saying, please reach out to us, because it really means a lot when people do that. Working with the Republican majority, it's tough. I think one of the main frustrations that I've had since I've been there is that, I try to find bipartisan support for some of my maybe less controversial bills. And I have found, some allies on the other side on certain specific issues. And it's really nice to work with those people on things, that aren't controversial, and I know other members sometimes say, 95% of the things that we talk about or pass in the legislature are non-controversial. And that's probably true. But, it's also difficult because if I work with that person on one issue and then we turn to maybe a more controversial or social issue, I have to kind of put aside my feeling about that to work with them on something else. And that can be difficult, I am very opinionated and I'm very strong in my values. I think that's what people admire about me. I don't shy away from the things that I fight for. And so, I think that everyone in that body knows where I stand on a lot of things. And so that can be a good thing sometimes and a bad thing.
So here in Wake County, your Republican candidates are going extinct at a remarkable pace. You know, if you look at the vote share of Republicans 20 years ago to today, it's much different. Many people were expecting much closer races in southern and northern Wake County in the last election cycle, but even in a year that was very favorable to Republicans, they could not break through. Do you think that the GOP is just moved too far over for Wake County?
I think so. I mean, I think that, obviously the changing of the demographics, here in our county has changed dramatically over the last 20 years. I mean, I'm one of those people that's moved here in the last 20 years. We've been here about 18 years. So, I think that, the quality of some of the candidates that they've been running is questionable. I mean, there's the opponent that ran against me in 2020 was a very MAGA, Republican. He didn't really fit in with our district. People in my district don't really, that doesn't appeal to them, at the ballot box. And so my opponent this cycle actually he portrayed himself as much more moderate, but I think that people see through that. Like, they see that they're saying things that sound good, but if you really dig into what they're saying, it really fits in with the whole national narrative of where the Republican Party is going. And so, we only have one Republican left in the legislature, in our legislative delegation here in Wake County. And that's honestly just because they've drawn her a district that favors her. And so we just really need to, and obviously some of the maps are probably going to be redrawn again. So they're going to do everything they can to try to, keep her in our delegation, but it's not going to last long. I think eventually, we will be an all-Democratic delegation.
So now on the flip side of things, while Republicans in Wake County have waned, Democrats statewide as a whole has somewhat struggled, whether it's been at the Senate level, at the Supreme Court level. So while the GOP has drifted more and more to the right, all of that is happening at the same time. Outside of legislation, just as a political leader, how do you respond to an atmosphere that sees so much charged interactions between the two sides, where it's so polarized, where you see one party moving to the right and one party continually trying to find that sweet spot among the electorate? What's that like, kind of finding that balance between where the electorate is and then also the changing demographics of the state?
Well, I'm not a political junkie like some people are. I mean, I enjoy politics, and, I'm minored in political science and the whole thing, but I don't really, get into like the nuts and bolts of like how to, do all that kind of thing. I think for me, like, I look at our caucus, for example, and just in our own 49-member caucus in the House, we have more moderate members. We have more very progressive left-leaning members. So even within our own caucus, we're kind of, figuring that sweet spot out. Like, how is our caucus going to stay together on a lot of things? How are we going to work together? But I think that, there's a place for everybody. There's a place for everybody in, like, our political system, whether you are far left, moderate, far right. I think that, when I look at our caucus, like, I went to this training where they talked about, how to lead in this type of environment. And they said, like, there's really kind of 4 types of leaders in a political caucus. There's the policy wonks. And I mean, when they were talking about this, I could think about the people in our caucus who fit all these different things. There's the policy wonks. There's the bridge builders. They're ones that are out there, really doing that kind of work. There's the public representatives that are kind of out there. And then there's the truth tellers. And I kind of look at myself as a truth teller, because I think that's the reason for that is because I came from an advocacy background. And so I am like the advocate. Like, I'm like, we've got to be talking about these things. We can't be shying away from talking about these issues. And I think people want to see that, but they also want to see the bridge builders. And so I think, we all have a role. And I think, like, we just all need to work together to move our platforms forward. But we all have a role in that moving forward.
Well, and you talked about the things that we need to be talking about. And so often, especially in North Carolina state politics, the narrative is driven by Republicans because they hold both chambers in the legislature. What are those issues do you feel like that we should be talking about more? I mean, because I know sometimes the narrative isn't always in your hands. What are some areas that you feel really do need to be advocated for and that you are doing so?
Yeah, I mean, obviously, like, the things that I talk about are around public education. I think that, and really, I think getting more attention is our early education and childcare system, which, to me, we should not just be talking K-12 or K, up to college. We need to be starting the conversation at birth, and, even prenatal. So I think that, that's something I try to talk a lot about. But, education gets a lot of airtime. Like, I feel like we do talk about that a lot. But I think the one thing is like centering what our message is around the economic message, and like making sure people understand that why we're fighting for public education. It's an economic message. We have to make sure that we're making people understand that if you get a strong public education, and everybody does, it only helps everybody. And so, I mean, obviously I talk a lot about that, but I think that, along with economics, like, our tax system and what the Republicans are trying to do in North Carolina around our tax system is something that we need to be better about messaging about. Of course, everyone wants lower taxes, but I think that people don't understand how eliminating the corporate income tax is going to hurt the individual taxpayer. And now we're hearing, they want to lower the individual tax even more. But I don't think people understand that that is going to hurt you and your daily life, because all I've heard about for the last year from my constituents is how they cannot get an appointment at the DMV. I mean, these are just common sense things that I think we need to relate that, if we cut our state revenue, you're not going to be able to get an appointment at DMV because nobody's going to be working there. And, nobody wants to work there because we haven't given those people a raise in, years and years and years. So it's just making sure people understand that the policies that the Republicans are trying to pass might sound good, but you have to really relate that to what is going to happen to them, in their daily life.
Going back to the topic of the divide and the polarization, it's so difficult sometimes to discuss with people, for people on the right to discuss with people on the left and vice versa, so often because the two sides inhibit different realities. They deal with different facts. It seems as though there aren't many common grounds that people have nowadays. And now that's not always the case. And, sometimes the battles that we draw in our head aren't always the ones that are being had out in the grocery stores and that sort of thing. But in an era like that, where so often people are discussing things from a whole different basis, from different numbers and different studies, and they're bringing that sort of thing up, what is it like trying to inhibit that space where everything is so divided and people are operating on whole different levels?
I mean, like for me, I do have to admit that I probably am one of those more left-leaning, progressives in the legislature. And I think people probably know that. That's no secret. But, so, sometimes I do find myself on the more progressive side of an issue that a constituent even might come to me to talk about. And I think that what I've found in, the 5 years I've been in the legislature and just in elected office is that people just really want to be heard. And I really value myself in the fact that I am always willing to have a conversation. I'm always willing to have a meeting. I never turn down anybody who wants to come to talk to me. And I think that people really value that. And so even though we might not be able to find like a common ground on things, and a lot of times, I, like I said before, I'm opinionated. I really stay to my values. And I think that, I think when somebody comes in, for example, to talk about abortion with me, they're never going to really be able to change my mind. I mean, I'm very, strong on that issue, but I think they respect the fact that I will have that meeting and I will talk to them. And, I think that being in the minority, especially, we can't control a lot. That's the one thing as somebody who, likes to have, control over my life and my schedule and all that stuff. That's the one big thing that it's been really difficult to not have any control. We have no control over our schedule. We have no control over what we're going to be talking about next week. We have no control over what bills are going to be heard or anything, what the narrative is, what the messaging, what are people talking about. It's all controlled about something else. So as a member, I have to figure out, what can I control? Okay, so what I can control is, one, my constituent relations and how I deal with the people I'm representing. And I do monthly office hours in my district, in coffee houses and breweries, anywhere that people will come and talk to me. I do town halls, I go to tons of community events. I really try to make myself extremely available to people. And I think that that's what people like about me as their representative, is that they see me out in the community. I'm in the schools. I'm doing all the things that I put my money where my mouth is. And I think we need more elected officials like that.
Now, you had talked about earlier a minor in political science. I bet you didn't think you would need a minor in cartography for the amount we talk about maps, but we are going to talk about maps now. So the state Senate are going to be redrawn. The House probably more so. You're probably going to get more competitive between those two because of the redrawn maps. Even though the maps are still slated towards Republicans, that will be the case. How do you see the maps and the redraw on the Senate side, the House becoming more competitive? How do you see that affecting 2024 and beyond?
I mean, I'm not looking forward to it because I feel like it's not going to get any better for us. We, on the Senate side, I mean, I will say a lot more money was put into the Senate side this year than the House side, and we were the ones that held. So I hope that people will look at that and say, okay, maybe the House is the way to go this cycle. I think that we had some really, really close races this year in the House that we could have won with a little bit more financial support and other support. I think that we just need to be looking at all the districts. We need to be recruiting the best candidates that we can. I admire people who lose and come back and run again. I don't know if I would do that. So I highly respect and admire those people that get back into the race again. But yeah, I mean, I think that it is going to be challenging. We can't shy away from that, and they're going to do everything they can to, stay in power. That's the ultimate goal for them.
Now, Republican leaders have claimed that several Democrats will vote with them to override Governor Cooper's veto on several issues. Now, I just know that there was a release that said that the House party, the House Democratic Caucus, will all hold firm on codifying Roe, so that shows a nice party unity. Do you think there's any merit to what Republicans are saying about the overriding of the veto?
I mean, they want to say that. They're going to say anything they can to scare people or, make sure or worry people, and really what they want to do is cause rifts within our 49 member caucus. So, I mean, the fact that everyone signed on to that bill, I was surprised, I will be honest, but I was thrilled, that some of our members decided to sign on. I think, nobody can predict. The speaker and whoever's saying this in the press, I mean, it's all hyperbole in my eyes because, one, we don't know what kind of bills are going to come. We don't know what those bills are going to say. We don't know anything about what's going to happen. And so we're working as hard as we can to really, have some unity in our caucus, to build relationships, and so I think that if we just keep doing that, then we will hold strong. And like I said at the beginning, I think that we know that there's a lot of pressure and a lot of attention on our caucus this year. And so, our theme going into this year is just been unity. And I really have faith that we will, continue to do that this year.
I know this was hashed over a lot, but I think it's interesting. Back when they were debating about the rules about the House, there was a lot of controversy over, scheduling the votes, not allowing the time granted to when they were going to schedule an override vote. I think that's hard for people that aren't in politics to understand that you can change the rules in such a way to not allow that. I mean, how frustrating is it that it's not so much just that the maps are being redrawn, but also even the rules that you're playing by in the legislature also kind of are being set up against you. For the people who are at home and think that's a little bit ridiculous, I mean, how do you react inside the House knowing that they're trying to game you out of being able to vote to sustain the veto?
Well, the first thing I'd say is, well, I guess the speaker maybe not be that positive that he has the votes, because why would you want to change the rules if you're positive that you can override any veto? So that's my first thought when I heard that he wanted to do that was, well, he must not be as secure in what is compared to what he's saying, in the public. I mean, to me, the Republicans use and abuse the rules all the time in the legislature. So this is just more public in that they're trying to change a rule that's been, there already, but they use and abuse the rules constantly. So this is not a new thing for me or I think any member who's been there. I mean, they're constantly laying things on the table or, without objection and moving on to really quick things. And, that's the one thing, like, as a member, you really have to know the rules backward and forwards. And I was there on 9/11 in 2019 when the veto override vote came, and I was standing right behind Deb Butler when she was, making her impassioned speech. And I was a freshman. I mean, that was just like, whoa, what is happening? It was crazy. But I saw firsthand, they did something that day that was, completely against the rules. It was just against the quorum, honestly, and it was very upsetting. So I'm not surprised that they're trying to do this. And I'm glad it's gotten some attention. I think that people understand how unfair it is to the members of our caucus because, I have a family. I have 3 kids, lots of other people have jobs and all these other things. And, sometimes we just can't be there, for whatever reason. Like, it's just like any job. People miss days, but now I just feel like, we can't make any plans. Like, my family can't make any summer plans, this year. And, my son is going off to college, in the fall. And I just pray that, like, we'll be done so that I can take him to college, just things like that I don't think people really understand, what a sacrifice it is for people. So
I want to close with this. We spent already during this discussion a lot about more reactive politics, especially from Democrats, because that's the nature of things. But always want to open up the floor to talk about the positives, because so often we talk about the negatives and holding back the tide and that sort of thing. But is there things during your time in the House or things you have planned for this session that you're really proud of or very excited about? Just those more positive stories that we can focus on as well, because as you know, so much of what we talk about is negative, that getting a little bit of light on the conversation is also very good.
Yeah, sure. I mean, I'll just continue to work on the things, that I find joy from, honestly. Like, you have to find joy in that building because it's a grind, and you have to really, find the people, the partners, the work that, lifts you up. And so for me, honestly, substitute teaching has been an amazing experience that I wish more legislators would do, especially if you work on education policy. I know not everybody can do it with their schedule or, life circumstances, but I will continue to do that. And it's just like really informed even more, about what I should be working on, in education policy. I'll be filing a big Leandra bill again this year. I've already started working on it to fund years 4 and 5. I have filed bills to the last 2 years to fund years 1, 2, and 3. And it's a lot of work. It is a lot of work. These bills are huge. And I sit at a big table like this with all of our staff, and they are dedicated to the work. But I feel terrible because the minute the bill's filed, it like basically goes in the trash. But I still think it's like really, really, really important to file those bills. All the bills that I file, even if I know going in won't get the light of day, but it's just extremely important for people to know what we're fighting for and to message on those bills. I'll be filing another more progressive abortion bill, similar to the RBG Act, which I filed in 2021, which removes all the barriers that Republicans have put up in place to block access to abortion. Even though we know abortion is legal here, it's not accessible to the majority of people. And so we'll be filing another bill around that, and especially focusing on medication abortion this year, because that's become the more prevalent, the more used form of abortion nationwide. And I just continue to learn more about abortion rights. I'm very proud that I feel like I've, become kind of a leader in our caucus on this issue. And I went to Mexico last year to learn more about abortion in Central and Latin America. It was a life-changing trip that I would love to talk more about with you guys at another time.
Yeah.
But I, I will continue to be like spreading the word about how important our those rights are in our state for economic reasons, for personal rights reasons, for health reasons, for so many reasons. And I'm proud of the partnerships and the advocacy around that issue that I've really found community with.
I said I was going to close with that. I lied.
Yeah.
I have one more for you, because you brought up the topic of education. I don't think anyone has ever talked as much about school boards as we have in the last 3 or 4 years. You've been on the front lines of that. Right now, of course, there's a lot of talk about the Parents' Bill of Rights. Some people call it the North Carolina Don't Say Gay bill. So there's that discussion that's being had right now. And then as well, the focus that over the last 2 years has come, or 3 years now, has come down on school boards. Just being on the front lines of education, seeing how many people are showing up with grievances to school board meetings, or putting pressure on their school board members, or putting pressure on teachers, and now the legislature trying to pass a bill that will do the same thing. As someone who's in the classrooms and has a firsthand experience with this, and then also trying to pass policy, what is it like seeing not only our state but our nation's eyes come down so closely to scrutinize members of our school board, members of our classrooms?
I mean, obviously very disturbing. I sat in the Senate Education Committee meeting the other day when they were hearing the Parents' Bill of Rights bill. It was so incredibly frustrating for somebody who dedicated her life for 10 years to parent involvement in schools is to hear that twisted around, and those bill sponsors acting like parents have never been able to be involved in schools before. Now we have to legislate this. And I'm thinking, I begged parents to come into the school and like work in the media center and like do all these other things for years and years and years, because I know how important parental involvement is, family involvement. It's also extremely frustrating that the experience of the members who are presenting that bill is not the experience of every child and every family in North Carolina. And for them to say that, well, you should just talk to your parents about this. This is, not a big deal. Just go to your parents is ignorant, because that is just, it's naive. It's frustrating, because I'm just like, they do not understand that is not the experience of many children in our schools. And I have seen that, like working in our schools, I've been in a kindergarten class where, a little girl like came up and said, we moved this weekend. And I said, oh, really? Well, that's exciting. She's like, well, it was like the third time we've moved in the last, the school year or something, something like that kind of. And, you want to say, well, what's the story and all this stuff, but you have to talk to that student in a way she understands. And, so obviously like, the experience of our students is not the experience that is being presented in these bills. And it's just, I want to ask a lot of these members, when is the last time that you were in a classroom? And not just like an elected official visit where they bring you in and like, give you like the rosy picture of what's going on, like really spend time there and like talk to kids and talk to parents and talk to teachers. Because like I said before, that's why, I feel like my experience has been so rewarding and unique. And I just wish that more people would do it.
Representative, I want to thank you for your time, for your perspective, for your advocacy in the House, and for taking the time to talk with us.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Viewers, the series that's ongoing. You can go back and look at our interview with Senator Sidney Batch, as well as ones that will come in future times. Check out all of our social media accounts for that information. Thank you so much for your time.